Hey guys! Tonight we're diving into one of history's most brutal family conflicts. It's a tale where a simple flower turned into an emblem of innocence and violence. Picture a white rose, elegant and pure, selected to symbolize the Virgin Mary. Then envision that same rose drenched in the blood of siblings, parents, and offspring. For 3 decades, England ripped itself to pieces over what seemed like a straightforward issue. Who should sit on the throne? But here's the catch. The family with the best right to it wasn't the one in power. And that oversight, that ignored rule about lineage passing through a female line, would claim nearly 100,000 English lives. So, how did a bloom meant to evoke divine favor become the flag of a lineage steeped in grief? Before we delve into this saga of blooms and devastation, I'd appreciate a quick favor. If this narrative grabs you, if you're pulled into the realm of medieval England with its splendor and savagery, hit that subscribe button. Give it a like if this intro has you hooked, and drop a comment sharing where you're tuning in from. Are you lounging in bed with the lights low or on a late-night drive? I'd really like to hear. And if you've got a fan humming or gentle rain sounds going, perfect. Let them mix with the tale, okay? Lower those lights, settle in, and join me as we stroll through the fields where the white rose first sprouted and where it came to no bloodshed. Let's head back to 1341. England is under Edward III, one of the country's top warrior monarchs. He has 5 sons who reach adulthood. Like any king from that era, Edward aims to secure his sons' futures. He grants them ranks, estates, and crucially personal badges, emblems to define their status. His 4th son, Edmund of Langley, gets the title Duke of York. For his badge, Edmund picks something surprising: a white rose. You might ask, why a rose? In medieval times, the rose wasn't merely decorative. It held profound religious significance. The white rose, especially linked to the Virgin Mary, standing for purity, innocence, and holy favor. It was heaven's bloom. By selecting the white rose, Edmund was declaring something bold. My line is favored, selected, graced by the divine. It was a daring assertion, and as events unfolded, it proved perilous too. Symbols carry weight. Once you link meaning to an object, once you declare this flower embodies your family's sacred entitlement, you can't abandon it. That white rose defined the Yorks. It appeared on their flags, etched in their fortresses, sewn on their troops' gear, and over time it became a cause worth dying for. But let's step back and consider why the Yorks were significant at all. Edmund of Langley, the original Duke of York, wasn't a major figure. He was the 4th son, far from the top in succession. His elder brothers claimed the prime rewards: the crown, riches, status. Edmund received a dukedom and a flower. So how did his heirs come to think they merited the throne? The key is alliances through marriage. Edmund's elder brother, Edward III's 2nd son, was Lionel of Antwerp. Lionel was massive. Records note he towered over 6 feet, a giant for the time. But despite his stature, Lionel had an issue. Only a daughter, Philippa. When Lionel passed young, Philippa inherited his royal claim. In medieval England, women couldn't reign outright, but they could transmit their claim to offspring. Philippa's line eventually wed into the Yorks. So things get tangled. Edmund of Langley's grandson, Richard of York, traced his ancestry to Lionel through his mother's side. That gave Richard a claim stronger than the ruling Lancastrians, who stemmed from Edward III's 3rd son, John of Gaunt. See the dilemma? The Yorks held the superior legal right, but via a woman. In the 1400s, that was a huge obstacle. Society had rigid views on inheritance, sons always first. A female passing a royal claim was debatable, even shocking. It upended beliefs about authority. The Lancastrians, on the throne since 1399, weren't about to yield to some obscure legal point. They dismissed it, pretending the York claim didn't exist. For a bit, that held. But ignoring a grievance doesn't resolve it. It festers. Over years, as Lancastrian rulers weakened and their hold slipped, the Yorks recalled that White Rose their forebear chose. They began thinking, perhaps we do deserve more. Perhaps that throne is ours. And that's where the real sorrow starts. The Wars of the Roses, that 30-year slaughter engulfing England, wasn't truly good against evil or champions versus rogues. It was a legal nuance nobody could settle. Should succession be male only, or could women pass it too? Such a minor query, but when crowns and realms are at stake, minor queries spawn blood rivers. Let me set the scene for England as this feud heated up. It's 1450. King Henry VI is ruling, and to say it mildly, he's struggling. Henry had what experts think was severe mental illness, likely catatonic schizophrenia or psychosis. He had spells where he totally withdrew, gazing blankly, unable to talk or identify anyone. Picture governing a nation when your king can't recall his name. In one 1453 episode, officials had to name a regent to rule till he improved. They picked Richard, Duke of York, the man with that stronger claim via his mother's line. Abruptly, the guy who felt he should be king got a sample of ruling. Once you've sampled that authority, it's tough to relinquish. When Henry improved in 1455, he wanted normalcy back. He expected Richard to resign and revert to a mere lord. But Richard had witnessed effective leadership. He'd issued orders, earned respect, begun fixing Henry's disorder-created mess. Now he was meant to step aside. This is where Richard of York's character matters. He wasn't foolish. He was sharp, skilled, admired by many peers. He'd observed Henry's French wife, Margaret of Anjou, basically managing the realm since her husband couldn't. And Margaret despised Richard. She viewed him as a risk to her son's future, and she was spot on, not because he was wicked, but because he was capable. In a realm crumbling under an inept king and his driven queen, capability threatens. So Margaret acted strategically. She persuaded nobles to oust Richard as regent. She basically said, "Thanks for minding the seat, but we'll handle it now." Richard, feeling deceived and slighted, did what any mighty medieval noble would. He assembled an army. The first clash of the Wars of the Roses happened at St. Albans on May 22, 1455. It wasn't massive, about 3,000 men altogether. It ended in under an hour, but it was fierce. Close-quarters combat in the town's tight streets. When over, Richard of York triumphed. He seized King Henry, injured but living. The Duke of Somerset, a key Margaret ally, lay dead. And here's the gut-wrenching bit. This didn't need to spark war. Post-St. Albans, a fragile truce lasted 4 years. Richard didn't seize the crown. He resumed as protector and aimed to operate inside the framework. But Margaret never pardoned him. She never overlooked. She spent those years silently forging ties, rallying backers, gearing up to retaliate. Consider what that implied. England's destiny rested with a queen who wouldn't yield and a duke convinced he'd been robbed of his birthright. Two individuals, each sure of their justice, each refusing retreat. And trapped between were countless ordinary English folk who simply sought peaceful lives, unconcerned with which rose to back. The White Rose of York began as a mark of purity, divine blessing, celestial grace. But by 1455, it signified something else: resistance. It meant some were ready to battle for what they saw as theirs, even if it shredded the realm. And the most sorrowful aspect? In 1455, nobody foresaw the coming horror. They figured St. Albans wrapped it. They thought minor violence would resolve the matter. They didn't realize they stood at the dawn of 30 years of nightmare. Imagine being an average person in England then. You wake to news of a fight. Nobles you've never encountered battled in a place you've never been. A few thousand perished. But existence continues, right? Except it doesn't, as factions form. Two clusters of influential families, each recruiting followers, demanding allegiance. Pick wrong, serve the wrong master, or live in the wrong area, and you lose all. Your property, your job, your existence. That's what renders the Wars of the Roses so heartbreaking. No foreign foe threatened England, no clear good-evil clash. It was kin versus kin, neighbor versus neighbor, all over an inheritance query that a basic pact could have fixed, but ego bars basic pacts. And the white rose, that lovely sign of innocence, was poised to drown in blood. The takeaway, resonating across 6 centuries, is symbols count. Attach your essence to one, a flower, flag, or notion, and it gains sway over you. The Yorks could have stepped back, accepted Lancastrian rule, and found harmony. But generations had convinced them the white rose marked them as exceptional, chosen, fated for glory. Believe that, wrap your identity in deserving more, and releasing it grows nearly impossible. When Edmund of Langley selected that white rose in 1341, he likely just found it appealing. He appreciated the sacred tie to the Virgin Mary. He couldn't foresee his great-great-grandson wielding it as a standard against the king. He couldn't picture his chosen bloom symbolizing one of England's goriest struggles. But legacies operate that way, don't they? Choices seem minor then, but decades or centuries on, they reverberate unexpectedly. Edmund chose a flower. His descendants got a burden. And here's the truly eerie part. The white rose wasn't the war's sole emblem. The Lancastrians had theirs. A red rose. White against red. Purity versus fervor. York versus Lancaster. When those roses collided on battlefields, England bled in hues unseen before. As you nod off tonight, ponder this. What emblems do you bear? What convictions did prior generations hand down? Are they worth battling for, or just lovely blooms leading to spikes? The white rose flowered in blood in 1455. But the heart-rending tale yet awaits. For Richard of York, the man with the top claim, the skilled leader who might have excelled as king, faces a destiny so harsh, so crushing, it would linger in England for ages. That's our next stop, the snow and muck of Wakefield, where a duke turns legend and the white rose discovers true bleeding. You know what's tougher than a bad king? One so mentally unwell he can't recognize his wife. And worse still, that king's wife being sharper, more tactical, and more eager to shed blood than any man around. Welcome to 1450s England, where the crown perched on a man who sometimes forgot his kingship, and true control lay with a Frenchwoman who'd allow nothing, not ethics, not pity, not her son's purity, to block her path to triumph. This is Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou's tale, a king craving peace and a queen grasping that peace was an indulgence she couldn't indulge. And if today's political mess seems rough, wait till you learn of a medieval queen who commanded troops personally, decreed executions sans trial, and once let her 7-year-old son pick how 2 captives should perish. History dubs her France's she-wolf. But was she a beast, or merely a woman safeguarding her kin in a male-dominated, violent world. Let's begin with Henry, as you must grasp how utterly unsuited he was for rule. Henry VI ascended at 9 months old. His father, Henry V, died abruptly, leaving a baby the throne. Infant kingship isn't fatal. Regents manage till maturity. The issue: Henry never matured in kingly terms. Accounts paint him as mild, devout, profoundly faithful. He established Eton College and King's College, Cambridge. He loathed violence, favored devotion over governance, and evidently lacked interest in the harsh choices kingship demanded. One record calls him better suited for monkhood than monarchy. Frankly, that's the gentlest phrasing. Henry would have shone as a cleric. He'd have been a poor king, even sane. But he wasn't sane. In August 1453, Henry broke. Details are fuzzy, but he withdrew entirely, silent, immobile, unresponsive. He sat staring. Aides couldn't make him eat, acknowledge his infant son, or know his wife. Experts now suggest catatonic schizophrenia or acute psychosis. Medieval folk blamed divine wrath or sorcery. This lasted 17 months with England led by a virtual statue. Imagine the disorder: stalled administration, nobles vying for sway, foes circling like blood-sending sharks. This prompted Richard of York's role as Lord Protector, as mentioned before. But consider Margaret of Anjou's ordeal. At 23, when her husband collapsed with a newborn, a teetering kingdom, and a Duke of York whose claim outranked her son's, she was French. Half the English elite already resented her. England had lost the 100 Years' War to France, and here was a French princess wed to their king. The Union sealed a humiliating treaty ceding land for naught, so Margaret had ample cause for paranoia, for fear. And in medieval politics, fear breeds danger. Here's where Margaret chose a path defining England's next 15 years. She could have allied with Richard of York, respected his status, shared authority. Instead, she waged political war. She allied with York haters, built a son-loyal faction, made clear she'd never view Richard as more than a latent traitor. Pause and consider. In Margaret's shoes, what would you choose? Husband disabled, baby son heir. A man with valid claim who might anytime prioritize his line over yours. Trust him, seek truce? Or, like Margaret, assume worst and prep for conflict? No simple reply, right? That's the Wars of the Roses tragedy. Nearly all had valid motives. Margaret wasn't vile for shielding her son. Richard wasn't for feeling wronged, but unyielding valid grudges spell disaster. Let me share the true Margaret of Anjou, not the she-wolf trope, but the woman. Daughter of René of Anjou, a lesser French noble claiming kingship of Naples and Jerusalem, but holding neither. She grew in a court prizing art, verse, culture. Accounts call her lovely, clever, educated. Wed to Henry in 1445 at 15, to a stranger, dispatched to a resentful foreign land, expected to bear heirs and stay silent. But Margaret wouldn't stay silent. And that's intriguing, as medieval queens were decorative. Pray, birth kids, occasionally plead mercy when kings were harsh, not command armies, not forge pacts, certainly not outrule husbands. Margaret did all, paying in historical memory. When Henry recovered from his first madness in 1455, Margaret swiftly sidelined Richard of York, convincing Henry to revoke his protectorate. She filled government with her allies. When Richard raised troops sparking St. Albans, Margaret organized Lancastrian response. Not Henry, who scarcely grasped events. Margaret ran it. And here's where it turns wild. In 1459, after political games and minor fights, war reignited. Margaret mustered an army, not as regent or advisor, but leader. She journeyed to Scotland for troop aid, persuading their queen for soldiers via English land promises, then led south. There's the 1460 Battle of Wakefield, we'll cover later. But note Margaret's post-battle acts. Lancastrians won. Richard of York died. Her forces captured Yorkist nobles, including the Earl of Salisbury. She ordered instant executions, no trial, no mercy, swift harshness. But it darkens. Multiple records claim after Wakefield, Margaret's 7-year-old son, Edward of Lancaster, was there when 2 Yorkist knights faced the Queen. Per the tale, Margaret asked her son the traitor's fate. The boy, raised amid brutal war, said behead them. Margaret obliged, letting her child decree deaths. Some experts deem this propaganda. Yorkists won later, motive to vilify Margaret, but its believability reflects her repute. Folks thought her capable of such ruthlessness. In medieval politics, repute is key. What pains me about Margaret, she fought not for self, not to rule alone. Every harsh choice, alliance, battlefield was for her son. Edward of Lancaster was her universe. She'd waited 7 years for a child amid whispers Henry was too pious for betting or God punished England. When Edward arrived, Margaret devoted all to his throne inheritance. Issue: Henry undermined her. In 1460, after Yorkists captured Henry, Richard of York struck a deal. Henry stays king till death, throne then to Yorks, not Edward of Lancaster. Henry agreed, disinheriting his son for peace. Imagine Margaret's rage. Years battling for Edward's right, Henry surrenders it in one chat. That's why Margaret couldn't halt. Her husband was too frail to guard their son's future. Without her fights, schemes, threats, armies, Edward got nothing. This highlights medieval politics' fascination, women's roles in a system denying them official power. Margaret lacked legal sway, couldn't inherit throne, command armies, sign treaties officially. Yet she did all via something stronger than law: resolve, drive, and a husband too weak to halt her. Chronicler Edward Hall, 1500s, described Margaret. She surpassed others in beauty, favor, wit, policy, her courage more manly than womanly. Hall meant insult. In his era, mannish was women's worst trait, but reread: smart, strategic, brave, strong. Survivor's traits, not villains, but survival's shadow. Margaret's brutality alienated allies. Negotiating with foe Scotland questioned her loyalty. Her French roots, unchangeable, made her suspect. Her husband dominance unsettled folk. Medieval marriage ideals, wife weaker than husband, violated norms. Historians term unqueenly behavior. Margaret faced constant accusations. Leading armies, unqueenly. Political alliances, unqueenly. Outshining husband, definitely unqueenly. But what option? Let son lose inheritance for ladylikeness? This was medieval women's bind. Too passive, useless. Too active, she-wolf. Margaret chose she-wolf. England bled for it. Some might think, was Margaret so unlike surrounding men? Richard ordered killings. Earl of Warwick slew captives. Every male noble used violence for goals. Why Margaret the monster? Answers complex, but expectations. Male ruthlessness, politics, female, shocking, unnatural, wicked. Margaret played men's game in a gown. History judged differently. But the real tragedy: Margaret wasn't dumb. She knew each fight, each foe deepened chaos, but trapped. Start violence, declare enemies, battle them. You can't stop. Stopping seems weak, weakness kills. So Margaret fought on, year after year, clash after clash. Even defeated, fleeing to Scotland, then France, husband captive, she persisted. What else? Surrender? Render all deaths futile? A 1461 moment captures Margaret. Army crushed at Towton, bloodiest English battle. Husband enemy held. She flees hostile lands with son at capture risk. Chronicles say her own soldiers robbed her, stealing goods, abandoning her. But she endured, reached Scotland, negotiated aid, planned next push within months. That's Margaret of Anjou, robbed, beaten, exiled, unyielding. So the query I leave as we advance, was Margaret's circumstances victim, or did her choices turn dispute to slaughter? Could she truce with Richard of York, or war inevitable once Henry proved unfit? And crucially, fighting for child's future, is there too far? Margaret was about to learn feared women's consequences, cost all she cherished. And the White Rose of York, hurt but unbroken, was set to resurgence with fury shocking even Margaret's stern heart. That fury has a name, about to alter all. There's a unique historical figure who never claims a throne but steers all who do. Puppet masters, influence brokers, shadow string pullers. In 15th century England, that was Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, dubbed the Kingmaker, not praise warning. A man so rich he fed 30,000 at one banquet, so influential he held castles in 20 counties, so driven he crowned 3 kings in a decade, ditching each when useless. But here's the overlooked on the Kingmaker. No mustache-twirling villain plotting domination. He had daughters, no sons, legacy dangling precariously. In medieval England, that thread could choke you. Visualize Warwick at power's peak. 1455, late 20s. Inherited vast holdings from father and wife's kin, likely England's richest noble. Wealth rivaling billionaires today. Records peg his yearly income at $7,000, not much, till noting King's was $10,000. Warwick held 70% royal revenue. Sink that in. But wealth was start. Warwick grasped medieval power's essence, not gold but owed favors. He mastered favor trading. Hundreds of knights, gentlemen nationwide owed him personally. Needing army? Letters out, men arrived. Why? Warwick secured court spots, resolved disputes, wed servants to their families. He'd embedded in England's fabric. Extract him, it unravels. You might wonder, if so mighty, why not crown himself? Reveals medieval power mechanics. Warwick lacked royalty. Noble descent, but many matched. Kingship required bloodline, royal blood. Warwick, for wealth and sway, had none. But daughters could, somewhat. Wed royal, grandchildren royal. Legacy secured. That's Warwick's tragic core. All alliances, betrayals, maneuvers driven by one fact: no sons. Medieval inheritance, daughters better than none, barely. Daughters couldn't inherit titles like sons, lead armies, hold power. Valuable only for marriages. Warwick planned, find royal husbands for daughters, control next kings via them. Brilliant, merciless, fated to spectacular fail. Meet Warwick's daughters, Isabel, elder, born circa 1451. Anne, likely 1456. Not mere tools to Warwick, his kids' sole legacy. But politics tangles love, strategy till indistinguishable. Loved them? Yes. Saw them as prime chess pieces? Yes. And here's fascinating. Warwick didn't shelter daughters like delicate blooms. Brought to court, schooled in politics, diplomacy, ensured game understanding. Anne Neville later implied childhood knowledge her marriage would shape England's fate. Imagine that burden? Every suitor alliance, conversation negotiation, smile consequential. Now, Warwick's tie to Richard of York, where it began. Warwick's father, Richard Neville, Earl of Salisbury, York's top backer. Neville's, York's cousins via tangled medieval ties needing full chart. Key, When Richard of York needed army against Lancastrian rule, Warwick supplied. When York needed leader, York better politician than soldier, Warwick stepped up. St. Albans, 1455. Warwick's first command taste. Discovered talent, not tactical brilliance, but psychological warfare. Medieval battles morale, momentum as much as weapons. At St. Albans, Warwick didn't just win, made victory emphatic, unignorable. Then, his signature, executed captives, medieval norm, nobles ransomed profitable. But Warwick knew fear sometimes tops gold. Killing Duke of Somerset, other Lancastrian heads messaged, "Fight us, no talks, no mercy, we end you." It succeeded. Lancastrians terrified briefly. Richard of York, thankful, boosted Warwick's clout. Plan seemed on track. Warwick power behind throne, essential man, needed by all. But indispensability works only if agreed. In 1460, something shattered Warwick's world. Richard of York died. We'll detail how later, consequence key. York's eldest, Edward, led Yorkists. Edward 19. Tall, handsome, charismatic, and crucially, not as compliant as father. Warwick likely figured control young Edward like guiding Richard. Edward Kidd, brave fighter, beloved, but needed seasoned advisors for realm. Needed Warwick for real calls while Edward posed regally. Edward differed. Warwick's tale warns, mistake obedience for loyalty. Example of Warwick's style, 1460, post-Northampton Yorkist win, captured Henry VI, seemed end, had king. But Warwick knew medieval politics. Power needs acceptance. Instead, declaring Edward king, kept Henry puppet while negotiating Parliament on York's succession. Incredible, Warwick ordered Lancastrian prisoner massacre. Chronicles note Warwick commanded, not Richard of York. Why? To assert charge, even Duke of York deferred on military. Psychology. I make tough calls, I stomach necessities. Briefly worked, all bowed to Warwick, even Richard of York let him lead. But Edward wasn't father. Edward, watching Warwick manipulate, learned game well. As Yorkist head in 1461, let Warwick think control. Took advice, gave honors, voiced gratitude, while quietly building base, alliances, prepping independence. That came quicker than expected. But grasp Warwick's mindset, decade crafting perfect machine, made broke kings, turned York's rebels to rulers, all for daughters' futures. By 1464, Warwick planned, Edward, King Edward IV, young, unwed. Warwick negotiates French princess match, Bona of Savoy, French king's sister-in-law. Alliance stabilizes England abroad, cements Warwick foreign policy architect. Then, marry daughter's royal kin, secure Neville legacy generations. Brilliant. Warwick to France, met French king, terms discussed, agreement near. Warwick likely planning feast, fed 30,000 once this century's event. Then Edward's letter. King secretly wed English commoner, no telling Warwick, no permission, no hint different marriage negotiation. Imagine that letter? Warwick in France promising for Edward. Edward fools him. Agreement's worthless. Reputation, career base ruined. Worst, Edward unapologetic. Moment everything shifted. Kingmaker saw he'd made uncontrollable monster. Edward, no puppet. Wouldn't let Warwick wed daughters for future. Edward did as pleased. Warwick must accept. Warwick couldn't. Identity, indispensable, needed man. Edward proved unneeded, sidelining Warwick's court allies with loyal to new queen, family. Warwick chose defining rest life, plunging England deeper chaos. If Edward denies power behind throne, Warwick finds new throne, king, dynasty, even betraying all fought, allying bitter foes, risking daughters, because Kingmaker's awful truth rather torch kingdom than admit not in control. And England learned desperate, shamed, resourceful man with armies is politics' deadliest. Game shifted. White red roses did impossible. Warwick's daughters, carefully placed chess pieces, about become queens in game costing all. But first, back to 1460, Richard of York's fate. That brutal heartbreak created conditions for Warwick's rise. It haunted Edward IV lifelong. Sometimes history's cruelest instance hit when victory nears, throne nearly grasped. Fate shatters all one afternoon. December 30th, 1460, Battle of Wakefield. Day, Richard, Duke of York, man who should have kinged strongest claim, made fatal error costing life, shaming family, turning legend sons avenged 25 years. Didn't need happen. York winning. Accord signed. Just wait. Back October 1460, 2 months pre-Wakefield, Richard of York back from Ireland, exile post-setbacks. But now different. Gathered forces, allied Warwick, Neville's, marched London army. At Parliament, audacious, walked throne, hand on it, claiming mine. Room silence deafening. Till then, York feigned aiding Mad Henry govern better, never openly claimed crown. Now, hand on seat, intentions plain. Nobles stumped, couldn't deny York claim via Lionel of Antwerp. But Henry sat king. Declaring York rightful meant Lancastrian 60-year illegitimacy. Hard when half built on Lancastrian favor. Compromise, active accord, Henry king lifetime, death, throne to Richard of York, heirs, not Henry's son Edward of Lancaster. Lancastrian line disinherited. Henry kept crown till death. York agreed. Decades fight, battles, maneuvers, won. Not perfectly, immediately, but won. Wait, Henry die. Poor health not long. York 49 could wait, but couldn't, as one unagreed to accord. Unwilling son disinherited, gathering North Army. Margaret of Anjou, France's she-wolf, seeking York's head. A military setup late 1460. York forces split. Warwick London main army protecting king, government, York North Sandal Castle near Wakefield, Yorkshire. Small force serve $5,000. Plan, Christmas there, rest, await reinforcements. Margaret wouldn't wait. Assembled Lancastrian army, 15,000, 20,000. Chronicles vary, but outnumbered York's vastly. Positioned near Wakefield, miles from York's castle, daring fight. Story murky. Historians debate centuries what next. Known. December 30th. Richard left Sandal safety, marched small army engage Margaret's. Why? Some say tricked. Lancastrians sent small foraging party near castle, easy prey. York bit, led out, then ambush revealed. Others, tactical error. Underestimated Margaret's size, overestimated own. Or impatient, strike pre-growth. Medieval commanders lacked modern recon. Scouts, spies often wrong. Third theory, heartbreaking. Chronicles suggest York out his son Edmund in field. Edmund 17 sent small force, now overwhelmed. York, father, couldn't sit while son fought. Died, so rode rescue. Never know true, maybe mix. But Richard of York, legally next throne, rode cold December morn from Sandal into massacre. Wakefield short. How not? York, more 5,000. Margaret 4 times. Yorkists surrounded, overwhelmed, shredded. Close numbers, battle swing, 4-1, outcome set. Richard fought valiantly. Chronicles agree. No run, surrender, plea. Fought till couldn't. Somewhere chaos, blood, screams, Duke of York fell. Man should have king died Yorkshire mud. Throne dream with him, but humiliation not end. Far. Here's dark, deliberate cruelty haunting English history. Lancastrian soldiers found body, severed head, standard traitor treatment. But someone, order unknown, decided beheading insufficient, wanted statement, humiliate York so never challenge again. Took severed head, placed paper crown, mock York's claim. Stuck on spike, mounted Micklegate bar, York City's main gate. Symbolism, vicious, Duke of York on own city's gate. Paper crown, reminder how near glory, far fell. Chronicler Edward Hall, decades later. Head on York gates, paper crown garnished. Image, man who'd touched England's throne. Reduced grotesque ornament, mocked death as never life. Didn't stop Richard. Son, Edmund, 17, Earl of Rutland, killed Wakefield. Circumstances disputed. Some died battle beside father. Others, darker. Edmund survived, fled to Wakefield Bridge, caught Lord John Clifford, begged mercy, teen, no threat. Clifford, your father slew mine, now I you. Clifford's father died St. Albans, Lancastrian side. 5 years revenge wait. Killed Edmund personally, adult slaying teen cold blood, calling justice. Then Edmund's head spiked beside father's. 2 York generations, trophies on own city gates. Imagine Edward, eldest York son, hearing Wakefield news. Father dead. Teen brother dead. Heads mocked spikes. North England celebrates family ruin. 19, thrust Yorkist lead after worst defeat. What do? Surrender. Flee, accept Lancastrian strength. Negotiate peace. Trade claim for safe exile. Edward none. Did history altering. Turned grief rage, humiliation resolve. Within 3 months, one battle, brutal, decisive, blood-drenched. England forever changed. But linger Wakefield, not mere military loss. Psychological scar never healed. Cecily Neville, York's widow, lived knowing husband. Son mocked death. Explained other kid's father. Brother gone, enemies rejoicing. Younger sons. George, 11. Richard 8, grew knowing family ridiculed gate. Wonder Richard became controversial. Wonder boys turned merciless men. Wakefield tragedy, not just December 30th, 1460. What day birthed? Yorkist generation never forgive, forget, stop till every Lancastrian destroyed, turned political spat blood feud, made compromise impossible. And heartbreaking. Richard of York won. Accord gave all sons more blood, just wait, but battled anyway, tricked, mistake, save son. Decision cost life, legacy, England decade war. Lesson patience, knowing win even if not feels. York achieved goal, throne promised line, but insufficient. Wanted battle vindication, crush Lancastrians fully, tired wait, settle once. Reasons died. Mud Wakefield, severed head, paper mockery crown, became Yorkists' top recruitment tool. Nothing motivates army like leader humiliated death. Margaret of Anjou thought Wakefield victory, killing York, displaying head-crushed Yorkist cause. Wrong, created martyr, gave Yorkists Lancastrian cruelty symbol invoked 25 years. Every Yorkist battle, recall paper crown, fight fiercer. Edward, 19, lost father, brother, proved inherited more than throne claim. Inherited white rose, ensured bloom over corpses mocking father's memory. Vengeance coming, swift, brutal, terrible, beyond imagine. Because 2 months place called Towton, England faces bloodiest day history. Day 28,000 die snow. Day white rose proves bloom winter, blood fertilized. Margaret at Wakefield, thinking win, unaware, unleashed. Picture, Palm Sunday, March 29th, 1461. Snow falls Yorkshire field. 50,000 men set fight 10 hours. By dusk, 28,000 dead. More casualties than some first day. More Gettysburg, Waterloo. By population percentage, Towton bloodiest British soil battle. 1% England died one day. Repeat, one every 100 English killed afternoon. Today, U.S., 3 million dead one afternoon, and not distant war, invasion, English killing English, neighbor, field running red, nearby rivercock color changed, all because 19-year-old sought revenge, father's death. 2 months since Wakefield, 2 since Richard of York's head piked paper crown, 2 since young Edward lost father, brother humiliating way. Those months, Edward transformed grieving teen terrifying, man nothing lose, army follow hell. But pre-Towton, Edward's path miraculous survival, tactical brilliance proved not just Richard of York's son, more dangerous. Post-Wakefield, Margaret didn't pause. Marched victorious army south to London, looting, burning. Chronicles call terrifying. Northerners, Scottish mercenaries, Welsh soldiers, Lancastrian loyalists promised plunder towns. Edward Welsh marches, England-Wales border, desperately raising army. 19, avenging father, protecting family remnant, somehow defeating enemy greatest war victory. February the 2nd, 1461, Edward's first lead battle, Mortimer's Cross, showed inherited special, inspired darkest moments. Chronicles, pre-battle parhelion, sundog, 3 sons via ice crystals. Soldiers panicked, bad omen. Edward quick thought, reframed, 3 sons, Holy Trinity. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, God favors. Adopted 3 sons symbol after. Brilliant. Disaster to rally cry. Worked. Edward won Mortimer's Cross, secured Wales, gave Yorkists needed hope. But while Edward won Wales, South bad. Margaret neared London. Warwick rode stop with main Yorkist force. Met 2nd St. Albans February 17th. Lancastrians won decisively. Warwick lost. Worse, Lancastrians recaptured Henry VI, Warwick's prisoner. Now, Margaret had king, major win, huge army camped outside London, ready take capital, end Yorkist rebellion. Then, unexpected, London citizens refused gates, heard Margaret's army tales, looting, burning, Scottish mercenaries ignoring English law, property. Lord Mayor messaged, army unwelcome. Victory yours, city not. Margaret, fatally, didn't force. Thought siege long? Worried unruly army control hostile area? Mistake? Withdrew north, waited Edward. Worst choice ever. Gave Edward time. March Wales, London, rally supporters, do audacious change war dynamic. March 4th, 1461, Edward entered London, welcomed liberator. Same day did father never fully dared, declared self-king, not heir, protector, king. King Edward IV or 19, father dead barely 2 months, claimed throne military victory, popular support. Act of Accord, legal compromise passing throne York's post-Henry. Edward shredded said, taking now, problem, meet battlefield. Bold, reckless, worked. Edward grasped civil war, legalities less than military facts. Fact, controlled London, growing army, looked king. Chronicles describe Edward extraordinarily handsome, charismatic. Over 6 feet, medieval giant, golden hair, smile making forget ordered thousands deaths. But prove under pretty face mind calculated brutality, proud horrify father. Post-declaring king, Edward marched north confront Margaret. Sent orders historians debate savagery. Post-battle, no mercy common soldiers. Usually, battles end nobles ransomed. Commons flee surrender. Edward, all Lancastrian fighters die. No prisoners, ransoms mercy. Why? Understood must final battle, couldn't afford drawn war, needed break Lancastrian cause utterly, never threaten. Meant kill leaders, destroy army. Forces met near Towton village March 28th, day before Palm Sunday. Snow falling, late March, little ice age, brutal European winters, below freezing, howling wind. 50,000 men kill each other. 50,000. Most medieval battles 5,000, 10,000 total. Towton, largest English soil ever. Still, every northern English able-bodied seemed there. Forced side, fight. Dawn, March 29th. Killing began. Towton started archery duel. English battle standard. Thousands archers volleyed across field. Weather factored. Wind, snow south-north. Yorkist to Lancastrian. Yorkist arrows flew far, hard. Lancastrian short, slowed headwind. Yorkist commander Lord Fauconberg noticed, ordered massive volley, retreat. Lancastrians, snow-blinded, fired thought positions. Yorkists back, arrows hit empty. Yorkists advanced, grabbed Lancastrian arrows, fired back, used enemy ammo against, post-archery, armies clashed hand-to-hand, Towton turned slaughter, fighting intense, sustained, 10 straight hours, sword versus sword, axe versus shield, men screaming, dying snow. No strategy, tactics, just armies grinding via attrition. Accounts describe horror film scenes, slipping blood ground, bodies piled, obstacles climbed, snow red, pink, red, more blood soaked. Nearby Rivercock corpse filled, walkable on bodies, through Edward front fighting. Not rear command like many kings, thick, armor-bloodied, rallying, wavering men. Edward grasped, father didn't. Can't inspire castle safety. Must risk death beside. Mid-afternoon, battle undecided, both exhausted, bleeding, low men. Then reinforcements, not Margaret's, Edward's. Duke of Norfolk arrived, thousands fresh troops, slammed Lancastrian flank. Lancastrian line held ours, broke. Breaking turned terrible, apocalyptic. Edward's orders, no mercy. Hunt, kill all. Lancs ran south river, hoping cross escape. Swollen snowmelt, hundreds drowned. Others far bank caught York cavalry, cut. Chronicles, pursuit miles, York soldiers killing fleeing Lancs night. Sources estimate 28,000 dead Towton. Modern think slight exaggerate, but 20,000, 28,000 deaths one day. Unfathomable. Tragic more. Most dead not nobles, pros, ordinary, farmers, craftsmen, merchants force side, fight. Uncaring white or red rose throne, died anyway. Two families couldn't settle peacefully. 1990s Towton digs found mass grave, 38 men. Forensics, horrific. Skulls axe split, faces blade mutilated, arm defense wounds. One skull, 9 injuries, another blade through bone. Not clean deaths, agony hacked, likely by neighbors. Post-Towton, Edward undisputed king. Henry VI and the Margaret fled North Scotland, broken. Lancastrian cause shattered. White Rose won overwhelming violence, but victory cost changes. Edward 19 riding in, 20 out different. How not? Ordered tens thousands deaths. Saw snow-red English blood. Won father's throne. Pricefield corpses. Kingdom traumatized, worst violence ever. England post-Towton question simple. Worth? Throne worth 28,000 lives? White Rose worth blood drown? Edward thought yes. Next 12 years built Kingdom Towton ashes, but bloody field ghosts haunted decisions. Start reign killing large owned population? How convince trust? Turn soldiers farmers, warriors neighbors. Prevent dead 28,000 families revenge? That's civil war's terrible math. Each death creates orphans, widows remembering. Each battlefield future hatred source. Each victory seeds next revolt. Edward won Towton, but war's roses far over. Many ways, just starting. Because now Edward dealt more complex than military foes. Dealt Warwick, Kingmaker, thinking puppet throned. Dealt Margaret of Anjou, plotting return. Dealt own heart, reckless, politically disastrous decision, undo Towton achieved. But that's love, ambition, deadliest woman Edward met. Lancastrian blooded commoner become queen, mother two princes' fates haunt England centuries. Every realm needs fairy tale, every king love story making people believe romance destiny. Edward IV got beautiful widow oak tree petitioning king help, king so smitten, secret marries. Should happy end, songs, celebrations ever after, except not fairy tale. Politics, medieval politics, love marriage over strategy, not romantic, catastrophic. Edward's-Elizabeth Woodville Union scandal rocked England foundations, wrecked key ally tie, seeded tragedy, consumed family. Wildest. Elizabeth shouldn't near throne. Lancastrian widow 2 kids, barely estate funds. Should invisible. Instead, most controversial English queen. Depending ask, vicious propaganda victim or manipulative witch seduced king, destroyed kingdom. Truth complicated, far interesting. Back of 1464. 3 years post Towton, Edward early 20s. Tall, handsome, charming, London beloved. Stabilized kingdom, exiled Lancastrians, decent king job. But problem, marry. Medieval monarchy, heirless king, civil war wait. All watch Edward pick bride. Warwick perfect, Bona of Savoy, French king sister-in-law, marriage French alliance, stabilize international, cement Warwick English foreign policy architect. Warwick confident, to France negotiate, met Louis the Léonard, dowries, treaties, deal basically done. Warwick imagining wedding feast, fed 30s and once, diplomatic decade event. While Warwick France, Edward England falling love woman opposite royal bride, Elizabeth Woodville. Elizabeth, born, par 1437, minor 5 years Edward Sr. Unusual, kings wed younger women, youth fertility, malleability. Elizabeth, neither young nor malleable. Daughter Richard Woodville, Jacquetta of Luxembourg. Woodville's respectable minor nobility, landed gentry, not important. Problematic, Elizabeth Pryor married Lancastrian knight John Grey. Died fighting Yorkists, Second St. Albans. Elizabeth not commoner royal standards, Lancastrian widow. Husband died versus Edward's forces. 2 sons, Thomas, Richard Grey. Medieval kings didn't wed widows' kids. Complicated, messy succession issues. Mary Elizabeth, Lancastrian boys, king's stepsons, political complications. Every calculation, Elizabeth Woodville worst queen choice. Edward married anyway. Meeting story mythic retold. Popular, Elizabeth at late husband estate, financial struggle. Yorkist government confiscated lands, punish husband, Lancastrian loyalty. Heard King Edward hunting nearby forest, positioned self under oak, Grafton Oak, with 2 young sons, hoping petition land return. Edward saw instantly smitten. Chronicles, extraordinarily beautiful, long blonde hair, remarkable poise, but smart, beauty insufficient. Edward advances, kings expected favors, attractive court women. Elizabeth refused, not gently. Accounts, when Edward seduced, Elizabeth knife-owned throat rather die than dishonor. Genuine virtue or strategy? Never know. Maybe honor protect, or understood, king many mistresses, 1 queen. Refuse mistress, forced choice, leave or marry. Edward chose marriage, absolute secret, no counsel. Warwick, pageantry, political usual royal weddings. Married May 1st, 1464. Dawn small chapel, handful witnesses. So secret Edward's mother, unknowing. 5 months Edward hid marriage. 5 months Warwick negotiated French match. 5 months pretended options. Imagine Warwick learning. France promising Edward behalf. Time Edward married other. Humiliation complete. Why secret long? Some, genuinely conflicted, knew politically disastrous, couldn't annul. Others, 22-year-old overhead, no fix. Some, Deliberate power play, assert independence, Warwick control. Whatever. September 1464 announcement explosive. Nobles shocked. Commons delighted. Loved romance. Warwick absolutely, furiously, devastatingly betrayed. Not just marriage, power. Warwick years building Edward kingdom, winning battles, alliances. Now Edward says, thanks, decide self now. French match kept Warwick essential diplomat. Elizabeth made obsolete. Then worse, Elizabeth not content queen. Wanted power, positions, family. Large family, 7 siblings, 5 brothers, 2 sisters, plus 2 first marriage sons. All needed titles, lands, marriages. Edward handed Woodville's positions like treats. Elizabeth father Earl Rivers, England treasurer, brother Anthony close advisor, sisters wed wealthiest nobles. Controversial, Elizabeth 20-year-old brother John wed Catherine Neville, Dowager Duchess Norfolk, 60s. 20-year-old wedding 60s woman wealth, title. People scandalized. Established nobility, fought Edward Towton, supported Yorkist start, watched, seethed. Upstart Woodville's taking positions, marriages loyal, Yorkists deserved. Elizabeth Lancastrian background worsened. Whispers, Edward bewitched? Elizabeth, Mother Jacquetta used witchcraft and snare? Witchcraft accusations reveal medieval women power attitudes. Beautiful woman marries up, not genuine love, magic. Commoner queen, not skill, sorcery. 1469, formal witchcraft charges Elizabeth Jacquetta didn't stick, no evidence, but brought shows Woodville resentment generated. Drives me crazy, history remembers Elizabeth, scheming, seductress, witch, gold digger, but what option? Widow 2 kids, limited resources, caught king eye fortune. Say no? Turn secure kids' future? Elevate family minor gentry nobility top? Her perspective, world women, no economic political power. First husband died war probably uncared. Yorkists confiscated lands, struggling support kids. Most powerful man England loves, offers marriage. Would you know? I wouldn't. But accepting, Elizabeth targeted. Every Edward enemy, slighted noble, thought diplomatic marriage, all blamed Elizabeth. When Edward reign went wrong, inevitable, Elizabeth perfect scapegoat. 1468 moment captures Elizabeth impossible spot. Edward mother Cecily Neville, furious marriage. Chronicles, Cecily claimed Edward illegitimate, not late husband son, delegitimized marriage. Own mother called son bastard, opposed bride. Imagine family. Elizabeth trying queen, support husband, mother-in-law claiming king illegitimate, but through scandals, witchcraft, political fallout, Elizabeth seemed genuine love. 10 children marriage course. 10 not political convenience mark. 2 people enjoyed company. Eldest daughter, also Elizabeth, eventually key English history woman. But ahead. Understand. Elizabeth Woodville not passive piece, evil seductress, woman survive, thrive, brutal environment. Yes, promoted family aggressively, but world family connections everything. Survival, powerful relatives, blame. Tragedy. Elizabeth rise, created divisions, destroy family. Alienating Warwick, resenting old Yorkist nobility, inadvertently chain events, more war, betrayal, son's disappearance, haunt historians. But 1464, under oak, loving king, Elizabeth unknowing. Widow, seeking lands. Edward young king thought once hard over calculation. Both wrong. Medieval monarchy, no private decision, every king choice political, every marriage treaty, every child heir or threat. Edward thought love match, stable kingdom. Got 15 years relative peace followed catastrophe and dynasty. Create history greatest unsolved mystery. But pre-tragedy, what Edward died, left kingdom 12-year-old. Understand Warwick deciding enough. Kingmaker, humiliated, sidelined, decided Edward not listen, maybe Edward shouldn't king. Next chapter, betrayal scale, shock blood-soaked era, man powerful thought unmake kings easy make. Two brothers, Edward George, relationship tested in strangest English history death. Woodville marriage broke fragile peace. Next prove war's roses far over. Ever friend betray so completely changes you? Imagine friend most powerful kingdom noble. Betrayal not just hurts feelings, costs throne. That's Edward the Fourth's 1469–1471. Betrayal not just Warwick, made Edward king, also own brother, blood, should have loyalist. Story pride, ambition, resentment collide. Man thought indispensable discovers not. Brother decides maybe he king instead. Ruthless queen sees chance reclaim, lost, welcome. War's roses most complicated, backstabbing, insane 3 years. Alliances shift fast, need flowchart. Yesterday enemies today, allies tomorrow corpses. King deposed, restored, deposed, finally kills, imprisons nearly all betrayers. Starts. Warwick staring Edward council table, realizing young king created never do Warwick once again. 1469, 5 years post-Edward's secret Woodville marriage. 5 watching Woodvilles accumulate power, wealth, while Warwick sidelined. 5, Edward decision sans consulting throne winner. Warwick enough, but smart, not open rebel, March London overthrow. That traitor, traitors piked. Instead, clever, devastating, recruits Edward brother George rebellion figurehead. Make Edward dependent Warwick again. George, Duke of Clarence, fascinating medieval train wreck, born 1449, 11 years Edward Jr., grew shadow brilliant charismatic brother, watched Edward king, win battles, win English hearts. George jealous. Jealousy brothers common. But one king, other duke. Dangerous. George handsome like Edward, not quite. Tall, not quite. Charming, not quite. Everything Edward, slightly less. 8 daily. Chronicles, weak-willed, easily swayed, terrible decisions prone. Historian, no great intelligence, but ambition, spite, compensated wisdom, lack. Warwick, seeing George sulk court, saw opportunity. Warwick pitched George, York's second son. If Edward something, accidents happen, you king. But Woodville's prop Edward, remove, force proper govern advisors like me, you better position. Plus, marry my daughter Isabel, England richest heiress? George, yes, course. Marry Warwick fortune, position heir, revenge resented Woodvilles. All for betray own brother. July 1469, George, Warwick to Calais, English France port. George married Isabel, defiance, Edward wishes. Edward forbade, new meaning, alliance versus him. Did anyway, from Calais, proclamation criticizing Edward government, demand Woodville removal, then invaded. Landed England army, marched London. Complicated. Warwick pretended not rebellion versus Edward, just bad advisors correction. For Edward good, armed thousands precaution. Edward saw through, raised army confront, but pre-Edward engage, change, Warwick North supporters rose, destroyed Yorkist army Edgecote Moor. Suddenly Edward isolated, outnumbered, danger. Then Warwick did proved lost reality perspective, captured King Edward III, crowned, fought Towton for, should have greatest achievement, held Middleham Castle common criminal. Psychology, Warwick so convinced importance, thought imprisoned king, force demands, normal after. As if Edward forget kidnapped subject. Few months, almost worked. Warwick governed Edward name, issued orders, decisions keeping king locked. But imprisoned king problem, orders not serious if no holding authority hostage. Government crumbled, regional conflicts erupted, no clear lead. Warwick realized disaster. December 1469, Warwick pained, released Edward, acted kidnapping misunderstanding, hoped Edward forgive, move on. Edward didn't forgive, but smart, pretended. Welcomed Warwick court, thanked service, diplomatic noises, then quietly planned revenge, neutralized Warwick base, promoted Woodville's key positions, allied Warwick-hating nobles, dismantled Warwick built, smiling, acting friends. Warwick, realizing, panicked. Panic made career's insane decision. Ally Margaret of Anjou. Margaret of Anjou. She-wolf killed Warwick father Wakefield. Army slaughtered Warwick Towton. Represented decade fought against. Warwick team her. How greatest Yorkist supporter end Lancastrian? Wounded pride. Couldn't accept Edward unneed. If Edward ungrateful, disobedient, Warwick find different king. Even insane, incompetent Henry thinks meant ally bitterest enemy. 1470, Warwick fled France. George, with weak, easily led, fate tied Warwick. French court, Warwick negotiated alliance, Margaret must stomached both. Deal, Warwick invade England Lancastrian army, restore Henry VI. Exchange, Warwick younger daughter Anne marry Margaret's son Edward of Lancaster, Anne future queen. Edward succeeded father. Brilliant politics required swallow pride, ignore years, kill attempts. Tragically romantic, Anne Neville. 14 married Edward Lancaster, grew Warwick court, likely played Edward's sister's kids. Now political chip wed Lancastrian prince. Choice? No. Want marry son woman killed grandfather, head piked? Probably no. But medieval women no personal husband choice. Chronicles, Margaret insisted humiliating condition pre-alliance, Warwick public apologize, Yorkist victories roll. Admit wrong support Edward, essentially grovel. Warwick did, pride so wounded, grovel better admit Edward outmaneuvered. September 1470, Warwick invaded England. Edward distracted North Rebellion, likely Warwick agents. Warwick forces no resistance. Marched London, freed Henry II Tower imprisoned years, restored throne. Edward IV, 9 years king, suddenly fugitive. Fled coast youngest brother Richard, future Richard III. Unlike George stayed loyal, barely escaped Flanders life. Chronicles, Edward, Richard sailing as Warwick forces closed, desperate paid Captain Fur's backs, no money. 6 months, October 1470, April 1471, Henry VI king again, readeption historians call. Warwick did. Unmade one king, made another. Kingmaker proved throne control. Except Henry still insane, couldn't govern. Warwick got thought wanted, discovered charge incapacitated king more exhausting, uncooperative. Henry sat council staring wall, no decisions. Sometimes forgot king, asked Edward return. Meanwhile, Edward exile not idle, raised army, called favors. March 1471, invaded. What next military strategy? Political manipulation masterclass. Edward landed North England's small force. Claimed, brilliant, not reclaim throne. Just dukedom York back, lands, titles, nothing more. Lie, obviously. But gave wavering nobles excuse support sans immediate treason versus Henry. Edward marched south. Army grew. Towns opened gates. Neutrals suddenly recalled York loyalty. Importantly, George switched again. Weak traitor decided betray Warwick better than Edward. Brought troops Edward mid-campaign. Imagine Warwick hearing George defected Edward. Ally thought reliable, daughter married, backstabbed again. George betrayed all constantly, windway. Edward, Warwick armies met Barnet April 14, 1471. Thick fog, soldiers barely see 10 feet, Chaos, confusion, Warwick forces fought each other, mistook allies enemies, disaster. Fog cleared, Warwick dead. Kingmaker, crowned 2 kings, toppled 2, died battlefield, restore king unknowing day. Struck reaching horse flee. Some chronicles, died fighting, others, killed running. Either, England most powerful noble died mud. Edward displayed body London. See Kingmaker truly dead. But Edward not done. 3 weeks, May 4th, fought Tewkesbury. Target Margaret of Anjou, son Edward Lancaster. Another Yorkist win, young Edward Lancaster killed. Some battle, others post-capture execution. Either, Margaret's only son fought years for dead. 17. Poor Anne Neville, widow 15. Father dead, husband dead, family power destroyed. What when father ambition costs all? Final bloody 3 years act, May 21st, Henry VI died, Tower, London. Official, melancholy hearing son death. Nobody believed then now. Henry murdered, almost certainly Edward orders, deposed king alive, rally rebellion point, 6 weeks. Edward exile return, defeated Warwick. Killed, captured major Lancastrian leaders, secured throne thoroughly ever. Readeption over, Henry dead, Margaret prisoner, Lancastrian cause finished, but victories cost staggering. Brother turned brother. Age greatest friendship ended betrayal, death. Edward learned terrible, trust none, not advisors, allies, own blood. Because George alive, ambitious, weak enough, one more catastrophic decision and strangest execution English history. If choose death, what pick? Quick battle, peaceful sleep? What drowning wine barrel? Because that's George, Duke of Clarence, death 1478. Either strangest mercy-killing or bizarre assassination ever, nobody's sure which. But Edward ordered own brother executed, method so unusual people argue 500 years later. Storyman couldn't stop betraying forgiven. Desperate importance, self-destroyed trying. Family fractured ambition, suspicion. King no choice, kill own blood. Post-1470, 1471 chaos. Post-Warwick rebellion, George betrayal. You'd think George learned. Edward forgave. Generous, George literally fought Edward enemy's side. Welcomed court, restored titles, lands, acted treason, youthful mistake. All George do, shut up, grateful, live wealthy duke. George couldn't stop scheming, resenting, being George. Understand George, trapped birth order, middle son, medieval inheritance, middle son worst. Eldest Edward gets throne, power, all. Youngest Richard loyal supporter, no more expectation. Middle close taste power, far never have unless terrible all ahead. George daily thought, if Edward died, kids died, George king. Thought consumed, poisoned interaction, decision, relationship, but back post-Warwick death. Where George's final paranoia descent began. Warwick killed Barnet, left daughters Isabel, Anne. Isabel married George, rebellion plot part. Anne married Edward Lancaster, now dead. 2 young women sole heirs, massive Warwick fortune, complicated. George, Isabel husband, expected control all inheritance. Edward IV, other ideas, split George, Richard. Richard loved Anne Neville, or saw claim half England greatest fortune. Either wanted Mary Anne, Edward supported. George furious, no share, did incredibly petty, medieval, hid Anne. Chronicles. George dressed Anne kitchen maid, hid London house, hoping Richard can't find, can't marry. Imagined Duke, king brother, hide and seek widowed sister-in-law keep inheritance. Richard found Anne, accounts say discovered actual London townhouse kitchens, married early 1472. But damage, George, Richard, allies versus Warwick rebellion, now enemies' money. Edward watched brothers fight inheritance, thinking, family falling apart, I only holding. Marriage. Isabel should have settled George. Wealthy, Neville Power connected, got along reasonably. 4 children, 2 sons, 2 daughters. Few years, George almost content. Wife, kids, massive estates, one England richest. What more? Then, December 1476, Isabel died. Mid-20s post-birth son also died. Childbirth dangerous medieval, Isabel's death likely straightforward medical tragedy. But George didn't see. Mind-warped years, resentment, paranoia, decided murdered, specifically servant Anchoret Twinho via witchcraft poisoning. Evidence? No, none. But George, powerful Duke. 15th century England, Duke accuses murder, trouble evidence or not. George arrested, tried, executed Anchoret hours, no proper process. Used power kill woman probably innocent except present. Isabel died. Edward appalled. Not justice. Rich man commit murder, anger, grief. But Edward keep family, no punish. Warned, stop accusations, drop. George didn't. Made wilder claims. Woodvilles poisoned Isabel. Edward marriage. Elizabeth illegitimate. Edward betrothed another first. Spread rumors. Edward illegitimate. Mother Cecily affair. Edward not father-son. See George doing? Delegitimize Edward line. Edward illegitimate. Kids can't inherit. Next line. George. Edward tried once more peaceful. 1477 suggested George marry Mary Burgundy, Europe wealthiest heiress. Prestigious match get George England, constructive focus. But George bungled negotiations, arrogance, incompetence mix. Mary wed other. Then George unforgivable. Edward advisor helped convict Anchoret proper retrial cleared name posthumously. George accused plotting versus him. Sans consult Edward, legal, arrested, executed man. Edward realized George not annoying, incompetent, dangerous, executing own authority, above law, spreading treason rumors, behaving, planning throne challenge. June 1477, Edward arrested George, Parliament treason charges, false king legitimacy rumors, unauthorized executions, enemy correspondence prepping throne challenge, George trial, defended self, no defense lawyers medieval trials. Accounts, rambling, paranoid, unconvincing, claimed conspiracy versus him, Woodvilles destroy him, insisted loyal Edward, all justified, Parliament unbelieved, convicted treason, Edward faced impossible, forgive brother again, knowing probable betray, imprison life, lock dangerous animal, or eliminate threat permanent medieval logic. Edward chose execution. Story strange. George sentenced death February 1478, not immediate. Edward delayed, days, weeks. Parliament petitioned carry sentence, clear Edward struggled. Finally, February 18, 1478, George executed privately Tower, London. Official records vague, put death. But later chronicles, decades post detail fascinated centuries. Drowned but Malmsey wine. But large barrel, 108 gallons. Malmsey sweet Portuguese wine, George loved. Story, drowned barrel, or some versions chose method. True, contemporary no wine mention. Story maybe later dark humor invented. George loved wine, died in, get, or deliberate. Edward give brother death not brutal beheading, hanging. Drowning wine still drowning, terrible. But merciful alternatives. Some, George requested final dark comedy act, thumb nose, Edward death. Others, Edward chose make execution less horrific family, brother not beheaded common traitor, drowned expensive wine dramatic fool always, never know truth. But Edward devastated George's death, multiple chronicles. Edward haunted execution, more paranoid, suspicious after, deeply regretted kill brother, though George no choice. Richard, youngest brother, loyal, watched all. Watched George betray Edward multiple. Watched Edward forgive multiple. Watched George spiral paranoia, treason. Watched Edward order execution, guilt struggle. What did Richard? Taught family, loyalty, ambition price. Because 5 years, Richard own impossible family power decisions. Lessons George's death shaped haunt England centuries. But pre-Richard's story, what happened, Edward died, left kingdom 12-year-old boy. Understand George's death meant York family, meant trust broken forever. Edward never assumed family loyalty. White Rose survived external enemies, poisoned within ambition, paranoia. York brothers, Edward, George, Richard started allies, fight avenge father, claim throne, now one dead other's order, one king, guilt-haunted, one watching, learning, prepping moment, make own terrible choices family power. That moment coming. Edward IV, 5 years live, died, questions haunted, trust own family, how far people thrown, what when threatening throne own blood, those questions fell. Richard's answers create greatest English history mystery, end House York forever. Death comes all eventually, but king death, especially unprepared succession, not take one life, destroys kingdom. April 9th, 1483. Edward IV wakes ill post-fishing trip. Week, dead 40. That week, all built, peace, stability, balanced power, crumbles. Because Edward, fatal mistake, assumed more time. Now, 12-year-old son king, queen terrified, youngest brother suddenly England most powerful. Group children pawns, game and history greatest mystery, York dynasty extinction. Here tragedy shifts political intrigue more intimate, heartbreaking. Till now, wars roses adults terrible decisions. Next involves children, innocent, never asked royal birth, never wanted ambition violence web, wanted grow, live, never got. Talk Edward IV final years, understand leaving kingdom type, post 1469, 1471 chaos, post defeating Warwick, executing George, Edward got peace. 1471, 1483, England longest internal stability decades. Edward used wisely, rebuilt economy, promoted trade, arts. Not great intellectual, no universities founded, poetry written, but understood money, made England prosperous. Royal treasury bankrupt takeover, surplus 1480s, rare medieval monarchy, beloved commons. Chronicles. Accessible, friendly, walked London markets, talked merchants, craftsmen. 1. Edward chatted tradesman wife long, courtiers impatient, charisma made forget ordered thousands deaths, but peaceful facade cracks, Edward aging, not gracefully. Accounts, much weight later years, feasts, appetite caught up, Italian visitor, somewhat fat, late 1470s, 1483, significantly overweight, health strain, court tension, Woodville family, Elizabeth relatives, consolidated power decade, controlled key government, influence Edward children. Meanwhile, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, Edward youngest brother, spent years north governing Scotland borders. Richard loyal, competent, rewarded significant north power, not inner court circle, geographic political division, crucial Edward death, Woodville's London, near power, Richard, hundreds miles Yorkshire. That distance determined succession crisis. Early April 1483, Edward fishing trip. Yes, fishing. Great warrior won bloodiest British battle fishing friends. Apparently favorite, away court, river relax, but weather terrible, cold, rainy English spring. Edward soaked. During, shortly after, caught chronicles call chill cold. Modern, probably pneumonia, typhoid fever. Both kill medieval, even king. Days, seriously ill. Week, new dying. Here interesting, Edward deathbed realized not prepared son takeover. Edward V, yes, Edward V, though never crowned. 12 father's death. Lived Ludlow Castle, Wales. Raised educated maternal uncle Anthony Woodville, Earl Rivers. Groomed kingship nobody expected soon. Assumed Edward IV another decade too. But Edward deathbed. Quick decisions. Who govern while son underage? Obvious. Boy's mother, Queen Elizabeth Woodville. But problems. Woodville's unpopular. Many nobles resent rapid rise. Elizabeth Regent give Woodville's total control. Alternative, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Edward brother, government experienced, North respected. King's uncle, reasonable Lord Protector claim till young Edward age. But Richard distant court years. Edward still trust post-George? Chronicles, Edward deathbed decision hoped satisfy all. Appointed Richard Lord Protector, but council, including Woodville's, key decisions responsible. Tried balance, Richard Woodville's hoped cooperate young King Sec. Terrible plan. Created not balanced, competition child king control. Whoever controlled young Edward ruled England. Edward IV died April 9th, 1483, 40. Accounts, surprisingly quick. Healthy, active to dead 2 weeks. Buried St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. Same married Elizabeth Woodville 19 years prior. Should grand funeral, processions, mourning weeks, elaborate ceremonies. No time. Moment Edward died, all moved fast. Elizabeth Woodville, London immediate council. Wanted crowned son quick. Get London, coronation, official king pre-objections. Crowned, anointed, untouchable. Plan. Brother Anthony Ludlow, young king. Prepped bring Edward London armed escort. Not huge army, enough soldiers clear Woodville's charge. Objectors military deal. And Richard, Yorkshire hearing brother death, reports, wept. Loved Edward, loyal through all, watched execute brother George, stood decision George traitor. Richard adult life, good brother, loyal, no betray, scheme, problems. Now, Edward dead, Richard responsible protect Edward's son, govern kingdom. Problem, Richard no trust Woodville's, watched accumulate power 2 decades, saw operate, probably suspected correctly. If not, act fast, Woodville's sideline completely, rule boy king. So Richard did analyzed, argued 500 years, rode south on armed force, intercepted young Edward party pre-London. Meeting Stony Stratford, April 29th. Richard with Duke Buckingham, powerful noble Woodville grievances, met Anthony Woodville escorting young king. Richard arrested Anthony, other Woodville supporters. Accused plotting versus him, plan exclude rightful Lord Protector role. Then Richard took young Edward custody, claiming protect nephew bad advisors. Rescue or kidnapping? Depends ask. Richard view, doing brother asked, taking Lord Protector role, protecting young king family monopolize power. Elizabeth view. Richard arrested brother, took son prisoner. News reached London. Elizabeth panicked. New power struggle losers fate this family. Watched Edward execute own brother. Seen Towton, Tewkesbury, losing side hunted, killed. So Elizabeth did only thought. Ran. With remaining children, 5 daughters, 1 son Richard, Duke of York, fled sanctuary Westminster Abbey. Westminster Abbey chartered sanctuary, legal protected, even king's men no arrest. Elizabeth used before 1470 Warwick brief Henry II restore. New routine, gathered kids, grabbed valuables, barricaded abbey. Imagine fear, husband dead, brother arrested, eldest son custody untrusted man, hiding church other kids, unknowing if killed or political maneuver blowover. Meanwhile, Richard arrived London young Edward, surface fine. Richard public swore loyalty nephew. Arranged Edward housed Tower London, royal residence not just prison time, await coronation, scheduled June 22nd. Richard acted proper Lord Protector, decisions realm good, prep nephew coronation, but signs wrong, Richard arresting. Woodville supporters removed power. Ominously, Richard arguing young Edward might not legitimate king. Legal issue nobody really considered. Edward IV married Elizabeth Woodville secret? Rumors, then just, Edward previously engaged another woman, Eleanor Butler, pre-Elizabeth. If true, legal contract Eleanor, marriage Elizabeth bigamous, invalid, all children illegitimate, Edward VIII no legal king. True, no idea. Eleanor Butler dead years, no verify. Timing suspicious. Rumor suddenly important. Richard needed reason question Edward V throne. Here reach moment defines after. June 16th, 1483, Richard convinced Elizabeth Woodville release younger son Richard, Duke of York sanctuary. Official, young Edward Lonely Tower, wanted brother company. Elizabeth, probably pressure threat, agreed. Let 9-year-old Richard join 12-year-old brother Tower. Never saw again. Never saw either. Because next one, greatest English history mysteries. Tragedy haunts Westminster Abbey, Tower, London today. Crime, terrible people argue responsible 5 centuries later. 2 princes, Tower, summer break heart still come. Worst crime imagine? Murder terrible, betrayal heartbreaking, but murder children, never chance grow, nothing wrong except wrong family. Time, crosses soul hurt think territory, exactly discuss, haunting unsolved English history mystery. 2 young boys locked Tower 1483 summer, seen playing shooting arrows one day, vanished. No bodies, confession, closure, just silence echoed 500 plus years. Murdered? Almost certainly. Whom? Arguments start. Richard III, obvious suspect. Evidence not clear think. Henry VII, the motive gained deaths. Someone else maybe. No certain. 2 innocent children disappeared. Responsible got away. Introduce boys properly. Not just Prince's Tower. Real children personalities, dreams, stolen future. Edward V, born November 2nd, 1470. 12th summer 1483. Eldest Edward IV, Elizabeth Woodville son, raised birth king. Accounts, intelligent, educated, mature age. Lived Ludlow Castle, Wales, learning govern, studying Latin, French, prepping rule England. Think life, all reverence, prince, heir, future king. Tutors, servants, guards, never normal kid day friends play. All duty, preparation, destiny. Then father died. Future prepped reach. King Edward the Fagnar 12, achieved grandfather, great-grandfather fought, died, York family won, White Rose bloom another generation, except didn't. Richard Duke of York, younger brother, born August 17, 1473, 9th 1483. Named grandfather never met, Richard head piked Wakefield. Young Richard created Duke York infant, tradition monarch second son title. Accounts, cheerful, energetic boy. Less serious older brother, probably no kingship weight. Richard married age 4, Anne Mowbray, 5-year-old. Strategic medieval nobility marriages. Anne died 8, Richard widower pre-10. Boy already lost, political maneuvering short life. These 2 boys ended Tower London, summer 1483. Clear. Tower then prison, also royal palace. Traditional monarch stay Tower pre-coronation. Lived preparing grand ceremony. Edward the Thief, taken Tower May 19th, not necessarily sinister. Protocol, boys initially royal apartments, witnesses reported gardens playing, shooting arrows, seeming fine. Italian visitor Dominic Mancini, London time, later wrote saw boys windows apartments, people see outside tower walls. But summer progressed, sightings less. Boys moved inner chambers, no windows, fewer allowed see, late July, early August, nobody seeing. What happened? Timeline careful, truth details buried. June 22nd, supposed Edward V coronation, Parliament set. But June 25th, 3 days post-should coronation, Parliament passed Titulus Regius Act. Act, Edward IV marriage, Elizabeth Woodville. Invalid. Edward previous contract, Lady Eleanor Butler. Thus, all children illegitimate. Bastards no throne inherit. Convenient? Right. Richard needs legal justify, take throne nephew. Suddenly documentary evidence, nephew illegitimate. Timing strains credibility. Nobody disprove. Eleanor Butler dead. Edward IV dead. Only knew truth not talking. June 26th, Richard offered crown Parliament, accepted. July 6th, crowned King Richard III. Princes, now official bastards, no throne claim, remain Tower. Sinister. If Richard genuine believed illegitimate, thought self-rightful king, nephews no political import, why lock? Why not free? Send countryside quiet, live, no trouble? Answer. Crucial. Doesn't matter Richard believed. Matters others believed. Plenty England not accept Titulus Regius, saw convenient fiction, believed Edward V rightful king, Richard usurper. Long boys alive, rallying point rebellion. Long people point say, their real king, Richard throne insecure. So Richard problem. Couldn't free boys become enemy figureheads, keep locked indefinite postpone problem. Eventually, someone rescue, use, justify rebellion. Only permanent solve. Ensure boys never used versus him. See going? Only too logical. Richard killed princes secure throne or kept alive, dealt constant rebellion threats. Historical record suggests late summer 1483, boys disappeared. Most detailed account Thomas More, 30 years post. More, Richard ordered Sir James Tyrrell organize murder. Tyrrell, 2 accomplices, John Dighton, Miles Forrest, entered Prince's chamber night sleeping. Smothered pillows, pressed faces till breathing stopped. Buried bodies, staircase, foot tower. Account detailed, specific. More names, method, logistics. Problem, More wrote decades later, Tudor period, political reason paint Richard monster. More, or 5 princes disappeared, not witness. Info from claimed new, no verify truth or propaganda. Another problem, Tyrrell. More. Tyrrell confessed murders 1502, 19 years post, executed different crime, treason versus Henry VII, but no actual confession text, only More's second-hand Tyrrell supposedly said. Really confession? Tyrrell say what More claims, or confession invented give closure haunted England 2 decades crime. Certain contemporary sources, Italian diplomat July 1483 wrote rumors princes dead. French official Guillaume de Rochefort, January 1484 stated Richard killed nephews. Not proofs, rumors, accusations, but Showtime people suspected boys dead, blamed Richard. Suspicion not proof. Mystery deepens. Alternative theories plausible as Richard murderer. Theory 1, boys died natural causes. Medieval childhood dangerous. Disease, poor care, accidents. Kids died often. Royal 2. Doctor described Edward V poor health tower. Possible sick, died. Richard panicked, killed younger prevent rallying point, or both illness died natural. Richard covered. Knew all assume, killed. Theory 2, Henry VII killed. Sounds crazy. Henry took throne, 1485, 2 years post-disappear. But what if boys alive, 1485? Richard kept hidden alive. Henry found post-win, quietly murdered. Inconvenient own claim. Henry much reason want boys dead as Richard. More, claim shakier. Theory 3. Duke Buckingham did sans Richard knowledge. Buckingham Richard Closely coup throned Richard, but rebelled versus Richard October, 1483, months later. What if Buckingham killed Prince's own initiative, thinking favor Richard, caused break? Maybe Richard discovered, horrified, that why Buckingham executed treason. Never know correct theory, unless time machine, mystery unsolved, but focus often lost speculation, who done, human tragedy happened. 2 boys, 12, 9, locked room stone tower, should summer lives, understood happening, knew danger, or thought uncle keeping safe till settled. Imagine Edward, eldest, supposed king, prepping coronation, all told special, God chosen, greatness destined, then prisoner. Title stripped, called bastard, locked tower, little brother only company. Imagine Richard younger, not understand politics. No father died, mother scared, took church, sent brother cold stone building. Nobody say when home, asked guards when leave, wrote letters mother never delivered, cried sleep, comforted each other, older promising younger okay, though unbelieved. Night died, murder, illness, something, scared, suffer, time, pray, call mother, or death quick sleep pre-know, questions haunt, should you? Not just historical mystery, reminder adults' ambition, fear turn children casualties. 1624 or 200 years post-Prince's disappear. Workers renovating tower found wooden box buried staircase. Inside 2 children's skeletons. Location matched Thomas More account bodies buried. Bones examined, consistent boys. For a 10, 13, roughly Prince's ages disappear. King Charles II ordered bones reburied Westminster Abbey elaborate ceremony. There today urn Christopher Wren designed, inscription calling murdered princes. Nearly 350 years, bones treated Edward, Richard remains. But 1933, Bones' brief medical exam concluded probably princes, but limited, not scientific modern standards. DNA testing could prove York family, but royal family refused to allow DNA testing. Why? Afraid? Or respecting dead? Refused turn sacred burial crime scene? Mystery continues. 2 boys, room, summer childhood ended forever. Question echoes 5 centuries. Who killed princes? Why no admit? One certain. Disappearance doomed Richard III. Even if not kill, everyone thought. Made most hated English king. Hatred cost everything. When all fought one muddy field afternoon, how face, run, negotiate, or charge enemy, crown head, sword hand, no probable die, refuse coward go. Richard III chose charge. Choice, reckless, desperate, almost suicidal bravery defines more anything did. August 22, 1485, last Plantagenet King England died fighting Bosworth mud. Crown rolled bush, body stripped naked, abused, thrown horse-like meat. Dynasty ruled England 331 years, ended 32-year-old bleeding ditch clutching sword, but nobody tells. Richard reign doomed throne take. Not evil, incompetent. Everyone believed murdered nephews. Belief took hold. Nothing Richard did. Law passed, reform attempted, kindness showed, erased child killer, image thrown, innocent blood stained. So talk Richard's 2-year reign. One tragic, misunderstood English history periods. Howman probably trying right became villain, Shakespeare greatest plays, pure evil face centuries. Richard born October 2nd, 1452, fathering Hay Castle. Youngest 4 York brothers adulthood survived. Edward, Edmund, died Wakefield, George. Richard grew war's roses, childhood violence, uncertainty. 7 fathers' head piked Wakefield. 8 brother Edward crowned Towton. Unlike George, resentful, treacherous, Richard fiercely loyal. Supported Edward all, battles, crises, even execute George. Accounts, serious, competent, deeply committed Edward cause. Governed North efficiency, fairness apparent. Yorkshire liked, not charismatic Edward, reliable. Physical descriptions complicated centuries propaganda. Shakespeare, hunchbacked monster, deformed, unfinished, sent before time. But Tudor propaganda paint Richard outward inner evil manifestation. Real Richard scoliosis, curved spine. No skeleton found 2012 Leicester parking lot, scientists examined. Curvature significant, not extreme Shakespeare. Probably one shoulder higher, slight limp, but not twisted monster legend. Fact, accomplished horseman, skilled fighter, difficult if physically deformed legend. But scoliosis important, contributed reputation. Medieval often saw disability moral failing, divine punishment. Curved spine evidence, minds fundamentally wrong. Richard took throne, July 1483, genuine believed or public claimed, saving England chaos. Woodville's power grasping, young king illegitimate. Richard last legitimate son, Richard Duke York, rightful heir, not usurper, loyal brother duty. No? First months, Richard seemed decent king. Royal progress Midlands, North, showed subjects, heard cases, addressed grievances, passed laws reform bail, make legal accessible commons, promoted trade, commerce, accounts. Richard tried just accessible king people respect, but none mattered. Everyone whispering princes. Where? Why no sea since summer? Richard never direct addressed rumors, never explained nephews, silence damning. If alive, why not show? Dead natural, why not announce? Only explanation sense most, worst. Richard killed, trying cover. October 1483, barely 3 months' reign, major rebellion. Leader someone Richard should have trusted, Henry Stafford, Duke Buckingham. Same Buckingham helped Richard seize power, supported throne claim, richly rewarded lands, titles. Why Buckingham rebel? Historians debate. Some, genuine horrified, realized Richard killed princes, maybe thought just imprison, found murders, conscience rebelled. Others, own ambitions, saw opportunity seize power. Richard position weak. Some recruited Margaret Beaufort, mother young man Henry Tudor, own throne claim. Rebellion failed. Buckingham captured, executed November 1483. But damage. Richard knew own allies betray. Throne fundamentally unstable. People actively plot replace. Then Richard personal life fell, heartbreaking. April 1484, only legitimate son Edward Middleham died. 10. Cause unknown, probably illness, tuberculosis, dysentery. Medieval medicine couldn't save. Richard, wife Anne devastated. Anne never recovered grief, became ill, probably tuberculosis, died March 1485, shy 29th birthday. Richard lost son, wife within year, left no direct heirs, no family except distant relatives, illegitimate children. Rumors princes louder. People said Richard losses divine punishment murder nephews. God taking Richard children because Richard killed brothers. Believe divine justice or not, optics terrible. Meanwhile, France, Henry Tudor gathering army. Henry Tudor, later Henry VII, weakest throne claim discussed. Claim via mother Margaret Beaufort, descended John Gaunt illegitimate line, explicitly succession barred. Legally, Henry almost no right throne, usurper plain, but smart, understood Yorkists never quite, best end war, not crush enemy, absorb, make part story, instead destroy. So Henry brilliant, January 1486, 5 months post Bosworth, married Elizabeth York, eldest daughter Edward IV, Elizabeth Woodville, beautiful, gentle princess, lost father, brothers, uncle protection, everything. Now marrying man killed uncle, took throne. Think marriage meant Elizabeth's strongest claim alive anyone. Edward IV, legitimate daughter. If England allowed queens rule own right, like later Elizabeth I's Queen Victoria, Elizabeth York would have Queen England, not Henry. But 1486, women didn't rule, married rulers. Elizabeth married Henry, marriage Henry. Tudor gained legitimacy, never win battlefield. Union combined red rose Lancaster, white rose York. Henry created new symbol, Tudor Rose, red rose white center, red white Lancaster York, enemies united last, beautiful symbol, appears everywhere, Tudor architecture. Still see carved ceilings, Hampton Court Palace, Westminster Abbey. Red-white petals intertwined, promising bloodshed over, England healed, two warring houses one. But symbols easier reality. Merging dynasties doesn't erase past, complicates. Henry, Elizabeth marriage by accounts, genuine love match. Surprising political pure, but sources suggest cared each other. Elizabeth gave Henry 7 children, including Arthur, named legendary King Arthur. Henry connect new dynasty ancient British glory, and son named Henry, become Henry VIII. Elizabeth reportedly kind, pious, well-loved people, never trouble Henry, accepted queen consort role gracefully. Maybe saddest her story. Woman's strongest blood throne, claims spent life supporting character someone else dynasty. But even Elizabeth's side, children combining York-Lancaster blood, Henry couldn't save. Still people remembered House York. Believed Richard III rightful king. Whispered maybe one Tower princes survived. 1487, 2 years post-Bosworth, whispers action. Name, Lambert Simnel. 10-year-old Oxford boy, joiner son, carpenter basically. Someone, still unknown exactly, trained impersonate Edward Earl Warwick, son George Duke Clarence. Remember George, wine-drowned? Son Edward legitimate throne claim, York bloodline. Real Edward Warwick locked Tower London. Henry kept precisely claimed dangerous, but most unknowing. So Lambert Simnel appeared Ireland 1487 claiming Earl Warwick, escaped Tower, thousands believed. Irish lords crowned King Edward VI Dublin. Gathered army Irish soldiers, German mercenaries invaded England. Imagine Henry felt. One crown barely 2 years, married Elizabeth York, had son heir, thought stabilized kingdom. Now, 10-year-old imposter army, people supporting. Henry crushed rebellion Battlestoke Field, June 1487. Irish, German forces slaughtered. Then, Henry interesting. Captured Lambert alive. Instead, execute, showed mercy. Recognized Lambert child used adults' political agendas. Gave Lambert job royal kitchen spit Turner. Later promoted royal falconry. Lived peaceful royal service. Died Buenor 1525. Brilliant propaganda. Henry merciful, no fear pretenders. So secure, throne turn enemies servants. But pretenders not done. 1491, another young man claimed Richard Duke York, younger Tower Prince, named Perkin Warbeck, far dangerous Lambert, older, sophisticated, convincing. Warbeck claimed escaped brother murdered, hid years, rightful England king. People believed, French king believed or pretended, supporting Warbeck destabilize England good. Margaret Burgundy, sister Edward IV, Richard III, recognized Warbeck nephew, gave money, soldiers. Even James IV of Scotland believed, gave Warbeck own cousin marriage. 6 years, Perkin Warbeck constant threat Henry VII, tried invade England multiple, built Europe alliances, forced Henry spend enormous defense counter-propaganda. Worst Henry. Never completely prove Warbeck fraud. Nobody's sure real prince's fate. Finally, 1497, Warbeck Cornwall invasion failed, captured. Henry, merciful Simnel, couldn't again. Warbeck imprisoned Tower. Ironically, same real Prince Richard disappeared. When Warbeck tried escape 1499, Henry executed. But not enough. As long real Edward Earl Warwick alive Tower, always potential York loyalists rally. November 1489, Henry accused Edward Warwick conspiring Warbeck escape. Executed Edward, Edward 24. Prison since 10. Never done anything except York blood veins. That died. This Tudor Rose dark side. Pretty red-white united symbol. Behind, Henry VII systematically eliminated strong throne claims. Married Elizabeth York, yes, but imprisoned, executed cousins. Talked peace unity, ruled fear, control. Elizabeth York, gentle queen, supposedly healed England wounds. She watched cousins die. Watched Henry destroy last family power remnant. Said nothing, 'cause what say? She Tudor Rose too. Children half York, half Lancaster. Defend York, relatives threaten own son inheritance. Elizabeth York died February 1503, 37th birthday, childbirth complications. Henry reportedly devastated, genuinely loved, but death convenient, served purpose, gave legitimate heirs, made Tudor dynasty acceptable York supporters. Now gone. Henry rule sans complication. York queen perhaps more popular. So talk York dynasty actually achieved. Yes, lost end. Last York king died Bosworth. York princes disappeared Tower. York claimants executed, died out. But really fail? House York ruled England only 24 years total. Edward IV, 22 years. Richard III, 2 years, less generation. But short time changed England fundamentally. Edward IV modernized government, improved tax, strengthened finances, encouraged trade, commerce, made England richer, stable decades. Economic foundation allowed Tudors flourish. Built Edward York. Richard III, despite brief reign, terrible reputation, introduced legal reforms, protected commons' corrupt officials, made bail fairer, promoted merit over noble birth. Some best English law aspects Richard 2 years king. Tudor dynasty itself only existed. Henry VII married York princess. Every Tudor monarch, Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary the First, Elizabeth the Furners, had York blood veins via Elizabeth York. When Elizabeth I called self mere English, presented rightful heir England ancient glory, claiming grandfather Edward IV legacy, much grandfather Henry VII. White rose not die Bosworth, merged red rose, create new, stronger. Tudors get credit, one controlled narrative. Shakespeare wrote brilliant plays, made Richard III, monster, Henry VII, hero. But truth complicated. Truth, wars, roses, no heroes, villains. Desperate people, impossible choices. Fathers secure children futures. Mothers protect sons. Brothers betray brothers. Wives lose husbands. Children caught power struggles couldn't understand. Control. Richard York claim rightful inheritance, end head spike. Margaret Anjou, fight protect son, watch die battle. Warwick Kingmaker play sides, die it. George wine drowned, Prince's Tower. Richard III charge enemies, dying king, better living coward. Elizabeth York marry family conqueror, watch destroy last relatives. Weren't monsters, heroes. People, flawed, ambitious, desperate human, caught system power meant survival, weakness, death. Lesson, if lesson all tragedy, violent cycles incredibly hard break. Wars. Roses started 1399, Henry IV seized throne, Richard II didn't truly end till 1503, Elizabeth York died, last living old royal houses connection gone. 104 years intermittent civil war, betrayal, bloodshed. But did end. Not through total victory, through compromise, through marriage united enemies, through children carried both red-white roses, blood. Through people choose, finally stop fight, start build new. White Rose York represents important English history, represents legitimacy matters, rightful inheritance respected, women's power claims real, even if exercised through sons, represents Civil War tragedy, ambition cost, represents hope, even bloodiest conflicts eventually healed. Visit England today, still see white roses carved medieval buildings. Visit Fotheringhay Castle, Richard III born. Walk Tower, London, princes disappeared. Stand Leicester Cathedral. Richard III, finally buried honor. See Tudor Rose, Hampton Court Palace. Red-white petals intertwined forever. Not just historical curiosities. Reminders what happens, let power matter more people. Choose vengeance over mercy. Refuse compromise, forgive. Sacrifice children, future's own ambitions. House York failed, keep throne, but legacy survived ways never expected. Laws Richard III passed, economic system Edward IV built, blood every Tudor came after, cautionary tale left cost power, price peace. Perhaps that's final House York tragedy. Planted seeds never watch grow. Built foundations others claim credit, died believing failed, never knowing blood, ideas, sacrifices help shape one greatest English history dynasties. White rose bloomed blood, as said story beginning. But blood-soaked soil, something unexpected grew. Not just Tudor rose, but idea worst conflicts can end. Enemies become family, future, not repeat past. Thank you walking me this long, tragic, fascinating journey, House York. From Edmund Langley choosing white rose symbol through Towton bloodbath, tragedy Prince's Tower, Richard III, final Bosworth charge, to Tudor Rose, finally brought peace. Been story, ambition, betrayal, love loss, courage, cruelty. But most story people. Real people lived, fought, died one most turbulent English history periods. Hope learned something. Hope felt something. Hope remember behind every crown, battle, dynasty, human beings, hopes, fears, families trying protect. If want dive deeper period history, incredible resources out, archaeological discovery. Richard III Body 2012 renewed Wars Roses interest. Excellent documentaries, books, academic papers exploring events every angle. History never simple stories tell, always more discover. Speaking discoveries, so many other incredible historical stories waiting told. Stories, forgotten dynasties, lost kingdoms, people changed world ways forgotten. So stay tuned. Next journey through history just beginning. Until then, remember, history not just dates, battles, kings, queens. About understanding got here. About learning past, build better future. About recognizing people came before, not so different, us after all. Thank you listening. Thank you carrying these long-dead princes, kings, queens. Thank you being part this journey through one history's most beautiful, terrible stories. See you next.